Hi, my name is Brian Gregory. I'm the owner of Devia, and today I'm going to show you how to make a boffer weapon. You're going to need a lot of supplies for that. First off, you're going to need a core. This is a sample core. This is graphite kite spar. You can get it from a large kite manufacturer. You can also often find it at plastics companies as fiberglass tube or graphite rod. Another core that you can use is a cut-up golf club. Just make sure that it's a strong graphite core. You don't want a metal core that's going to bend. You're going to want to cut it off at the right level, and I'll get to that in a moment. You need plenty of duct tape. Very good supply to have around the house anyways. This is open cell foam, and this is closed cell foam. The difference is that if you look at the closed cell foam, it's very firm. The open cell foam is pretty squishy. The open cell foam you can find at upholstery stores or in a fabric store. Closed cell foam in a tube like this is generally sold as pipe foam or pipe insulation at a home improvement supply store. You're also going to want a good pair of scissors to cut through the foam with. A tape measure, make sure everything's up to size. And I use a pair of tights cut up to serve as the outside cover of the weapon I'm going to make. I'll show you how that works in a moment. When you get your pipe foam, your closed cell foam, there's a few different ways that you can get it. If you have scraps from a previous weapon, you're going to want to keep at least a few scraps around. I'll show you how those are used. When you put your pipe foam together, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough to cover your striking surfaces in at least 5/8 of an inch thickness, and the non-striking surfaces with at least 3/8 of an inch thickness. You'll notice that I have two different sizes here. We're going to layer them because I couldn't find precisely 5/8 inch. These are two 3/8 inch thicknesses. The one will fit around the other by the time that we're done. Core can come in a lot of different sizes. Whatever size you want, you're going to want to cut it down to make the appropriate size for your weapon. Today I'm going to be making a claw, which is a short weapon. That means that it needs to end up at 36 inches or less. You don't want to cut your core to exactly 36 inches, and I'll tell you why. You need to have some padding on either end of the core to make sure that it's safe when striking people. You need some padding on the butt end of the weapon, just to make sure that if you accidentally strike yourself or somebody else with that non-striking surface, it does have some cushioning. And then the fighting end of the weapon, you're going to want at least a 2-inch thick length of open cell foam, or you won't be able to thrust with it. So take your core, measure it out. For this particular core, I've cut it to be right about 30.5 inches. That's going to give us plenty of room on either end to put our tips on. When you cut your core down to size, you're going to want to run a piece of tape around the outside before cutting through it. A hacksaw usually works best. This tape keeps it from splintering too much while you're cutting. Now, I've already cut this piece of core down to size. The first thing that we're going to want to do is put a tip on the end of it. You'll see that I've already done that on this end. This is just a piece of closed cell foam twisted up and taped around. This will keep the core from pushing through whatever we end up putting on top of this. Once you've got your core cut to length, take a scrap of closed cell foam. You can always cut a new piece if you need to. Using your scissors, cut off about 1.5 to 2 inches of it. Take this piece of foam, twist it up pretty tightly until it's a little larger than the core that you're trying to tip. Take a piece of duct tape, tape around the outside, and then twist up the foam and tape it into place. The foam that you use, you want to be about 1/2 inch thick or less. You don't want it too large or else it'll just push off the end and not provide enough protection. Once you've got the end of the core tipped, you're going to want to cut your blade foam. First, you need to figure out how long you want your grip. I figure about here is going to work just great for this weapon. Make sure to remember that there's a little bit of foam that's going to cover the very end of it here. So, just mark the spot where you want the edge of the grip with your thumb. Take your piece of foam, hold it up so that the tip matches the foam tip that you've already put on the weapon. And then using your scissors, cut the foam to about the right length. The foam cuts through pretty easily. Next, you'll notice that usually, for this type of core, the foam rattles a bit. It's too large. We need to cut it down. First, most of these types of foam have a split in them. Go ahead and just tear up the split and open it up. Once the blade foam is open, you'll need to find out the right size to cut it down to. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be cutting off a thin strip of this foam so that it fits tight around the core. Not too tight. We don't want to be stressing ourselves and lowering the thickness of the core by pulling it too tight, but we also don't want it so loose that it starts rattling around, because that'll damage the connection to the core itself. So put your core inside. Overlap the foam a little bit so that you can tell exactly the right place to cut. In this case, we're going to cut right about here where the two parts overlap. Now that you've got the edge that you need to cut off marked, go ahead and cut it as straight as you can up the entire length of the blade. This should leave you with a thin strip of foam that you can just pull out. Now, take your core, fit it into your new blade foam that you've cut out, and you're going to want to use pieces of tape about 2.5 to 3 inches long to anchor the core to the foam. The easiest way to do this is to start at the top, peel it open, put your tape a ways inside around the core, close it shut, and then tape it down. Whenever you're taping a core, you want to make sure not to tape it down too tight so that it doesn't stress the foam and compress it too much. You want to make sure that it's still squishy. But don't do it so loose that it doesn't hold. Now that you've got the first piece laid, lay the next one in about halfway down the blade on the same side. And a third piece at the very bottom on the same side. Now take 2 more pieces and tape them on the alternating side in the gaps that you've left between the pieces of tape. That should give you a piece of foam that looks vaguely like this and keeps the blade so that it doesn't twist too much. It'll get tighter once we're done with the next step. Take a slightly longer piece of tape and, holding the gap closed, tape the bottom of the blade so that it's tight against the core. Now, in the next step, we're going to close this gap that we've got. Take your roll of tape. You need 1 piece of tape about as long as the entire blade. Now, starting at the top with your long piece of tape, tape along one edge of the gap, hold the gap closed, and put the tape around the other side. You're going to want to repeat this process the whole way down so that the gap ends up closed. You'll end up with something that looks like this. Tape whatever excess you have down to the blade, down to the core, and make sure that the gap is closed all the way underneath the tape. If you've left the gap underneath the tape, you need to pull it up and make sure that the gap gets closed before the tape gets stuck. It's okay if your tape looks like it has a few extra folds here and there. It's not going to harm the weapon at all. Now, we've got 1 piece done. You should be able to try to wiggle your foam. It should wiggle just slightly, but not much. And it should hold very firmly if you try to pull it up and down. This is to make sure that the blade stays firmly attached to the core when you're striking. The next step, if you're double layering the foam like I am, is to repeat this process with the next larger up size of foam. If you're using foam that's already at least 5/8 of an inch thick, you can skip this next part. Start off by taking your larger size of foam and doing the same thing, cutting it to the right length. If you're lucky, you'll find that the larger size foam that you use will completely cover the smaller core that you've got. In this case, you'll note that it doesn't. It often won't. So the easy fix for that is to take another section of closed cell foam and simply fill in the gap, taping it tight. If you don't have a section of closed cell foam lying around, use another tube of it and cut to the appropriate size. The next step is to firmly attach the larger piece of foam to the smaller core through the same method of a number of alternating small pieces of tape. Don't worry about the gap yet. We'll get to that in the next section.